I'm about to ruin some classic fairy tales for you, and I'm honestly thrilled and a little scared to do it. You think you know Snow White, Cinderella, Little Red Riding Hood? Nah, skip those. We've heard how grim those originals were. We are going deeper. There are other fairy tales from old Europe that are way darker, more twisted, more what the actual heck than anything Disney ever dared put on screen. I've got 5 of them. By the end of this, you might never sleep again, or you will just sleep with one eye open, clutching a nightlight. Don't say I didn't warn you. So you ready? Let's go on a messed up magical journey. And hey, if you are eating something, maybe put it aside. Some of these get pretty gross. Just saying. Let's start with a famous legend that already sounds creepy, the Pied Piper of Hamelin. You probably know the kiddie version. Colorfully dressed Piper dude lures rats out of town with his magic flute. Townsfolk refuse to pay. He takes revenge by leading all the children away. End of story, moral something something, pay off freelancers. Which honestly, yes, pay off freelancers. But here's the chilling part. In the original medieval legend, those kids never came back. Like 130 children followed the Piper into a cave or inside a mountain on June the 26th, 1284, and vanished. An entire generation of town's kids gone. No happily ever after, just an empty town with panicking parents. Some versions say a few kids survived. One was lame and couldn't keep up, one was deaf and didn't hear the music, one was blind and got lost, so they were left behind to tell everyone what happened. Can you imagine being the only kids left trying to explain that Hans the flute guy basically abducted your friends? The town of Hamelin, Germany, took this so seriously. They literally named a street Bungelosenstrasse, meaning street without ramps, where even to this day no music is allowed, supposedly as a mark of respect for the lost children. Like, no one is allowed to play music there because who knows, maybe Pied Piper's ghost gets triggered by beats or something. There's even historical records mentioning the loss of the children. People have speculated all kinds of explanations. Was it plague? Did the kids die of disease? Were they victims of some medieval trafficking? A children's crusade? Did they start a colony in Transylvania? Yes, there's a bizarre version where the Piper leads them to Transylvania. Vampires and Pipers, great combo. No one really knows. All we know is the fairy tale straight up says, pay your death or magical musician will yeet your kids into oblivion. That story would definitely make me double check I paid the exterminator on time. So yeah, the Pied Piper story we tell kids, and then he led the rats away, the end. Totally glosses over the mass child abduction. In reality, it's one of the darkest legends ever. And this is just our warm-up. Feeling cozy yet? No? Good. Let's get nastier. Next up, a Grimm's fairy tale called the Goose Girl. The title sounds harmless, right? A girl who tends geese, maybe some hitchings. Geese are kind of funny, they honk. No. This one is a betrayal story with a seriously vicious ending. So, the setup. A princess is sent off to marry a prince in a faraway kingdom, and she is accompanied by her maid. On the road, the maid does a total identity theft. She forces the princess to switch clothes and roles with her. The maid arrives at the destination and pretends she's the princess and actually marries the prince, while the real princess, now dressed in rags, is stuck tending geese. Why geese? I don't know, maybe it was the medieval equivalent of cleaning toilets, humiliating and full of squawking. The only one who knows the truth is the princess's magical talking horse head. Yes, you heard that right. See? The maid had the horse named Falada killed because she was afraid it would talk, which it could. The real princess convinces the slaughter guy to nail Falada's severed head above the city gate. Every day she passes it while herding geese, and the mounted horse head basically talks to her. It's weird and sad. Falada, you hang there. If your mother knew your plight, her heart would break, the horse head says. That's some nightmare fuel right there. Disembodied horse head giving you pep talks or maybe just making you feel worse. I imagine locals walking by like, ooh, is that thing talking? But apparently only she hears it. Anyway, eventually the king, the prince is dead, figures out something fishy. In classic fairy tale fashion, he gets the real princess to tell her story through some trick. In one version, she talks to an iron stove about her woes, not knowing the king is eavesdropping, because apparently fairy tale kings are all about that espionage. Truth comes out. Now the king has to punish the impostor maid who tried to steal the identity and crown. And oh boy, does he punish her. But he's sneaky about it. He's like, hey there, fake princess, hypothetically speaking, what would be a suitable punishment for someone who did what you did? You know, like betraying a princess and lying to the king? The dumb maid, not realizing the trap, actually suggests her own execution method. She basically says, I'd put that no-good person naked into a barrel lined with nails and have horses drag it around until they are dead. What? That's oddly specific and extremely brutal, lady. Guess what? The king's like, cool, great idea, thanks. And then immediately orders exactly that for her. I kid you not. They strip her naked, shove her into a barrel studded with spikes on the inside, hitch it to horses and parade her around until her lying, treacherous bed is shredded and done. That is how she dies. I mean, she definitely deserved punishment. She was ready to have the real princess killed and all. But then medieval justice went hard. Picture a spiked beer keg with a person in it rolling through town. It's like something out of Saw. And remember, this is from the brothers Grimm, who originally published this in 1815 for children. Albeit German children who apparently can handle a lot. Unsurprisingly, modern kids' books usually skip the part about the Iron Maiden barrel right execution. They might just say, and the wicked maid was punished, in one bland sentence. But nope, the original spells it out in glorious gory detail. Nail barrel that tour. I gotta admit, the poetic justice is chef's kiss. She basically wrote her own death sentence. But also, yikes, remind me never to volunteer ideas if a king asks me for punishment suggestions. Oh, maybe just like a timeout or something? Definitely not throw them into a spike torture barrel, Your Majesty. That might really misread the rumor, huh? 2 stories in, and we've had mouse child disappearance and a spiked barrel execution. We are on a roll, folks. Let's keep going down this rabbit hole of darkness. This next one is another Grimm special called The Girl Without Hands. It's less famous, but trust me, it's unforgettable once you hear it. Alternative title could be When Your Dad Makes Literally the Worst Deal Ever. So there's a poor miller. That's in fairy tales, man, they make some terrible choices. One day, the miller gets approached by the devil disguised as a traveler. The devil offers him wealth in exchange of what lies behind your mill. The miller, being a dummy, thinks, oh, behind my mill is just an old apple tree, sure, take it. He shakes on the deal. Congrats, dude, you just accidentally sold your daughter. Because obviously the devil meant the daughter behind the mill. Fine print, bro, fine print. When the devil comes to collect the girl, he finds out she's too pure. Like, she's so innocent and clean that the devil literally can't even touch her. The devil is like OCD level, he demands her father dirty her up or something. They wash her less, doesn't work, she's crying, and her tears keep her hands clean, etc. Finally, the devil's like, enough! If you don't cut off her hands, I'm taking you instead. And I still can't believe this. The father obeys. He freaking chops off his own daughter's hands with an axe to satisfy the devil. What the hell? This is where I, as a kid, would throw the book across the room and go hug my dad like, you'd never do that to me, right? Right? So the poor girl now has no hands. She's so pure that her stump bleeding gets washed by her tears and stays clean, which somehow foils the devil again because her purity is intact despite, being maimed. I guess sacrificial obedience counts as purity points? The devil thwarted leaves in Grimm's version. That tries to make amends. Offers to keep her in luxury now that they are rich, but she's like, no, I gotta go. I can't live here after you axed off my hands, Dad. Reasonable. She wanders off, armless, into the woods. And you know what? she actually gets a sort of happy turn. She finds a royal garden. The kindly king of the land sees this sweet, humble, harmless girl and is like, I'ma marry her. I have questions about how she ate or went to the bathroom during all this, but fairy tale logic glosses over those details. They do marry. She has a baby. Everything seems chill until the devil comes back for one more round of trickery. The devil basically intercepts letters between the king and his mother while the king is away. He forges one that says the queen, the harmless girl, gave birth to a monster baby, like a changeling or something, and then a follow-up letter as is from the king going, yeah, you should probably kill my wife and baby. Love, your son. The queen mother's like, ooh, harsh, but okay, I guess? Because apparently she's not gonna question her son ordering infanticide. Instead of outright killing them, small mercy, the mom warns the young queen and tells her to flee to save her life. So our armless heroine ends up wandering the woods again, now with her newborn baby strapped to her, living in the wilderness in extreme poverty for 7 years. 7 years. By now you're like, can this woman catch a break? Eventually, because she's just that pious and good, a miracle happens. Her hands grow back. Yeah, apparently God or an angel decides enough is enough and restores her missing hands one day. In one version, after 7 years of prayer, poof, she has hands again. Talk about slow customer service from above, but at least it came through in the end. And the king, who never actually died in a war or anything, finally finds her in the forest and is like, oh my gosh, I've been looking for you, sorry about that whole letter mix-up, that wasn't me. Let's be together again. And they live happily ever after finally. Now pause. Rewind to the start. The dark part of this story isn't even the devil's shenanigans of the miracle regrowth. It's that original first act with the father. In the very first edition that the Brothers Grimm collected, the father didn't just accidentally bother his daughter, he deliberately wanted her in a bad way. Yeah, in some old oral versions, Dad wanted to marry his own daughter. We are talking in vibes. The Grimms were like, okay, tweaky, and by the time they published, they sanitized it a bit. They changed the villain to the devil instead of a horny father. But even with the change, the dad still chops off his girl's hands under demonic pressure. So like, congrats, you are not a perv in the printed version, sir, but you are still the worst dad of the century. This tale is fascinating because it's kind of about the resilience and fate. The girl remains good and survives horrible trauma. But visually, can you imagine this in a kid's movie? The scene where Daddy Dearest brings an axe down on his crying daughter's wrists. Blood. Grimms do mention the blood quite explicitly, by the way. No way Disney is touching that. That's straight up horror territory. Actually, I think there is a scary movie loosely inspired by this. It's that disturbing. Also, the symbolism. Freud would have a field day. Hands cut off means lost power, etc. Not to mention the possible subtext of castration anxiety if we go the route. It's wild. When I first read this, I kept waiting for a happy twist earlier, like it was just a test, she gets her hands back immediately, or Dad was under a spell. But nope, he just does it, plain and simple. I guess greed, and in the very original lust, makes people literally disarm their own family. So yeah, next time someone says fairy tales are so simplistic and moral, point them to the girl without hands. The moral seems to be, parents can betray you horribly, but if you are pure of heart, you might get a miracle in the end. A bit of heavy lesson for bedtime, no? Alright, moving from dismemberment to more dismemberment, because the fun never stops here. Buckle up! If there's one grim tale that often comes up in the most messed up fairy tale ever lists, it's the Juniper Tree. This one really pushes the limits. It's got murder, cannibalism, and a revenge that's both satisfying and haunting. Honestly, it reads like a horror short story. And it even starts with the classic wicked stepmother scenario, but cranked up to 11. Here's the gist. A wealthy man's beloved wife dies, leaving him with their young son. He remarries, as one does in these stories, and the new stepmother, oh well, she hates her stepson. She has a daughter of her own and basically wants her girl to inherit everything. So she devises a plan straight out of a slasher film. One day, when the boy comes home from school, the stepmom offers him an apple from a chest. But when he leans in to get it, she slams the chest lid down and straight up decapitates him. Oh my god. She literally chops his head off with a heavy chest lid. I remember reading that and having to reread it like, did she just... Yeah, she did. Then, in panic or cold calculation, she props the boy's head back on his neck, tying a scarf around it to hide the wound, and sits him in a chair like nothing's wrong. Talk about a psychopath move. Then her daughter, the boy's half-sister, who actually loved the brother, comes in and is like, "Brother, moms want you to have an apple." But the boy doesn't answer because, he's dead. The sister is confused and tries to nudge him, and his head falls off. The little girl freaks out, understandably, thinking she accidentally killed him. The stepmother seizes this chance and goes, "Oh no, what have you done?" gaslighting the poor child into believing she caused her brother's death. The girl is traumatized, sobbing. To cover up her own crime, the stepmother then chops the boy's body into pieces and cooks him into a stew. Yes, she cannibalizes her stepson, but not just herself. Oh no, that would be too straightforward. She feeds the stew to her husband, the boy's father, for dinner. And this clueless man loves it. He's slurping down human stew like it's the best thing he's ever tasted, even asking for seconds. He's like, "Wife, this soup is delicious. What's the recipe?" Meanwhile, the daughter is watching, quietly collecting her brother's bones and crying. It's beyond horrific. Imagine being the daughter. You think you killed your brother, then mom literally turns him into brother's stew, and dad's complimenting the meal? Therapy? Lifetime of it, please? After dinner, the sister sneaks out and buries her brother's bones under the juniper tree in the yard, which is significant because it's where the boy's biological mother was buried and where she had wished for a child. The whole story began with the boy's birth under the juniper tree. And then the magic kicks in. The tree starts to stir and a mist or something comes out and suddenly the boy is reborn as a bird. Not a normal bird, a sort of supernatural bird with a beautiful song. The bird, which is the boy's spirit, flies around the village singing a haunting song that essentially goes, "My mother killed me, my father ate me." Super cheery lyrics, right? "And my sister buried my bones under the juniper tree. Tweet, I'm a bird now." It's like the most disturbing nursery rhyme ever. But the melody is so lovely that everyone who hears the song is like, "That's jam, I gotta have it." They don't quite get the lyrics, I guess, or maybe they are in denial about the content. Anyway, for his song, the bird is given some gifts. He collects a gold chain from one listener, a pair of fancy red shoes from another, and a millstone from some millers. Yeah, a huge stone. Finally, the bird boy returns home. He gives the gold chain to his father, who's like, "Wow, thanks, random bird. This blinkery completes my outfit." The red shoes to his sister, because she deserves something nice after all the trauma. And for the stepmother, the bird drops the millstone on her head. Boom, it crushes her on the spot, squishing the murderess instantly. Ding dong, the witch is dead. And as the dust or pulverized evil stepmom bits settle, the bird transforms back into the boy, alive and well, as if resurrected. Father, realizing none of this until now, is just like, "My boy!" They all hug it out, presumably right next to the splattered remains of stepmom. Happy ending? Kind of. I mean, the family unit is now dead, daughter and resurrected son, plus a huge mess to clean up in the kitchen and probably some long conversations about, "So honey, when exactly did you start hating my son, and why didn't I notice you are a homicidal maniac?" But those questions are left unanswered. The tale just ends with poof, everything's fine. Fine, except for the image seared in your brain of a dad unknowingly licking his bowl saying, "This stew is great," when that stew was his child. Oh, and the sister will never unsee her brother's head falling off and then being made into dinner. But sure, happily ever after, Grimm style. When I say this story is dark, I'm not exaggerating. Even the Grimm brothers themselves tone it down slightly in later editions, but the core is still there: child murder and cannibalism. Some scholars think it's partly metaphorical or relates to ancient myth. Personally, I think someone just wanted to tell a gnarly revenge tale and scare the crap out of listeners. If the moral was evil will be punished and the innocent will be restored, they sure found a memorable way to illustrate it. As a piece of horror, I really love it. It's so gruesome and dramatic, it's like Sweeney Todd fairy tale edition, but as a children's bedtime story, hell no. Imagine some kid asking for a bedtime story and you're like, "Sure, sweetie," and you bust out this. The child would never eat stew again, or sleep, or trust step-parents. It's nightmare fuel of a highest grade. Yet this was part of the children's and household tales by Grimm's in 1812. I guess kids in those days were just hardcore. Or parents would self-censor on the fly, like, then the bad lady sent the boy far away, missed him, and the bird came back with presents, the end. Because if you read it as is, you are basically reading them a grindhouse horror flick in fairy tale language. So yeah, the Juniper Tree, a tale of family values, if by values we mean decapitation, forced cannibalism, and vengeful avian reincarnation. It's one of my favorites in the sense that it left the biggest impression. Stop that, Disney. Actually, please don't. I don't need to see that live-action remake. How you guys are holding up? Need a break? Maybe a snack? On second thought, maybe don't grab a snack yet. The feast gets weirder. Let's shift from gore to psychological horror. For this, we venture to 17th century France, to the works of Charles Perrault, the guy who gave us Cinderella, Sleeping Beauty, etc. He has a tale called Donkeyskin. That it's just chef's kiss disturbing on a totally different level. This one deals with a big taboo: incest. Yeah, strap in. So, there's this king who has everything. He's absurdly rich thanks to a magical donkey that poops gold coins. No joke, the donkey's droppings are literally solid gold. I wish my dog at least pooped like quarters, would be nice. The king has a beautiful, kind queen and a lovely daughter. Life is good until the queen falls gravely ill. On her deathbed, she makes the king promise he will only remarry if he finds a woman as beautiful and virtuous as her. The king is like, "Of course, my dear." Queen dies, king mourns, and then starts searching for a new wife. Problem? His late wife set an impossible standard. He cannot find any woman who matches her beauty and goodness. Except, you guessed it, his own daughter. At this point, every reader goes, "No, don't go there." Perrault goes there. The king basically says, "Well, a promise is a promise. Looks like I gotta marry my daughter." He rationalizes it because technically he did promise only to wed someone like his wife, and only the daughter qualifies. That is some mental gymnastics, but the result is straightforward. Dad decides he is going to marry his horrified daughter. The princess is like, this is messed up in so many levels. She tries to stall him by demanding gifts that are hopefully impossible to get. First, she asks for a dress the color of the sky. King manages to get his tailors on it. Bam, she gets a sky blue dress. Then she demands a dress as silvery as a moon. Then they deliver a shimmering moon dress. Then a gown as bright as the sun. You can practically hear the kingdom's artisans saying, "Challenge accepted." That arrives too. Desperate, the princess asks for something even crazier: the skin of his magic gold-pooping donkey. She's basically thinking he will never kill his precious golden egg-laying goose, donkey, right? Wrong. King Dad is so far gone that he kills the donkey and gives her its hide. The donkey was literally his ATM, and he's like, "Who needs infinite money if I can have my daughter as my bride?" This dude is beyond help. When that last demand is met, the princess realizes, oh no, he's not backing down. At this point, her fairy godmother, yay, finally someone helpful, steps in and says, you gotta run, sweetie. The princess puts on the donkey skin as a disguise, basically wearing it like a cloak to hide her fancy dresses and her identity, and flees the castle before the dead can drag her to the altar. She takes the dresses with her, packed up via fairy magic into like an infinite chest, and off she goes looking like a filthy beggar wearing an actual donkey pelt, hence the name Donkeyskin. She ends up in another kingdom, working as a lowly scullery maid. Everyone thinks she's just this weird, dirty girl who smells like a stable because she's literally in a donkey hide. They mock her, calling her donkey skin as an insult. She lives humbly, hiding her royal past. But on Sundays, or whenever nobody's around, she cleans up and tries on her magical dresses just to feel human again. One day, the local young prince peeps through a door or keyhole and sees this mysterious girl in a radiant dress looking gorgeous. He's like, wow. But then she disappears into her donkey fur coat and he's very confused. Nevertheless, the prince is now love-struck. He gets lovesick to the point of like a Victorian novel illness. Won't eat, won't sleep, just pining for this mystery lady. He only knows that she's supposedly a servant called Donkeyskin. His parents are like, what do you want, son? Anything to make you better? And he's like, I want a cake baked by Donkeyskin. Weird request, but basically he wants a reason to interact with her, I guess. So Donkeyskin, the princess, bakes a cake for him. And in the process, a ring of hers falls into the butter. Some says she intentionally put it there. The prince finds a ring in his cake, hopefully not choking on it, and it's tiny, clearly belonging to the dainty hand of the woman he spied. He declares he'll marry whoever's finger fits this ring. Yeah, we got a Cinderella-esque moment with a ring instead of a glass slipper. Every lady around tries, and of course only Donkeyskin's finger is a match. She reveals herself, presumably throws off the smelly hide dramatically to show her sun-bright dress or something. Turns out she's a princess. Everyone's floored. The prince doesn't mind that his bride-to-be was recently an ashy, animal hide-wearing kitchen wench. He's thrilled. Now, here's the real kicker. The final scene has her father, you know, the one who wanted to marry her, show up at the wedding, and he's totally cool now because he's remarried to some other lady. They just casually mention, oh, King Dad found another queen in the meantime, so he's no longer crazy. Wait, what? That's it? That's how you resolve the fact that he was about to commit incest? Don't worry, folks, he found a different hottie, so he's not gonna chase his daughter anymore. Hooray! I have questions. But Perrault just ends it with everyone living happily ever after. The daughter doesn't seem to harbor any trauma or grudge. They all celebrate together. That's messed up. If I were her, Dad would never not be getting an invite to the nuptials, just saying. So yeah, the original Donkeyskin. It was published in 1697. Can you imagine the 17th century audience? Actually, the French court loved to risk scandalous stories, so maybe they ate it up, figuratively. But over time, many adaptations try to sanitize it by making the king like a stepfather, or the girl adopted, so it's technically not incest if he tries to marry her. Still gross, but people in the Victorian era were like, we cannot let it be her biological father, heavens no. Even with that tweak, the story's content was considered too shocking, and it wasn't told to kids much for a long time. It got a bit more popular in France in the 20th century, especially because of a 1970 film musical adaptation starring Catherine Deneuve, directed by Jacques Demy. I watched that movie once out of curiosity. It's bizarre. It's like a whimsical, pastel-colored musical with all the stuff kind of dance around in an artsy way. Still, I wouldn't call it kid-friendly. More like a cult classic for cinephiles. So, what's the moral here? Perrault, being a moralist, actually appended a moral in verse. Basically, he says it's about how a daughter's virtue and courage to flee sin is rewarded. and that it's better to expose yourself to hardship than to commit a horrible sin, or something along those lines. True, but also, ew. The moral also tongue-in-cheek suggests the story is so incredible that it can't be true, so obviously it's just a fairy tale, don't worry. Like he's winking, we know kings don't really try to marry their daughters. Some literary analysts say Donkeyskin is a tale to help kids metaphorically understand and survive abusive or inappropriate advances, teaching them to run and hide in ugliness to protect themselves. It's also about female independence in a twisted way. She escapes instead of obeying an evil command, which is rare in older tales. So yay, empowerment, in a story about near incest. As a modern reader, though, you are mostly left with, did I just read it? A father wanting to wed his child, and he killed his gold poop donkey for it? It's a lot to digest, no pun this time. If you told me a fairy tale had a magical gold-pooping donkey, I'd be its goofy comedy. But no, that's in one of the creepiest plots ever. I still remember the first time I hear about Donkeyskin. I was like 12 and read an article about the true origins of Cinderella-like tales. When I got to the summary of Donkeyskin, my jaw dropped. It's not violent like some others, but conceptually, it's one of the most disturbing. Because it's family, you know? This isn't a random witch or a giant wanting to eat her. It's her own dad wanting to do unspeakable things. That's a deep violation of trust and normalcy, presented so casually. I'm kind of impressed Perrault had the guts to publish it, even with his refined literary style. Anyway, if your idea of fairy tales was all fairy godmothers and charming princes, Donkeyskin is the one that says, oh, there are fairy godmothers and princes, alright, but first, suffer through this nightmare scenario. Good luck, kids. Fun fact, in the story, the Donkeyskin itself is described as the ugliest, nastiest cloak. I always imagined it must stink to high heaven. Like, the princess shows up to serve soup and everyone's holding their nose. So the fact the prince could see past that via keyhole spying, but still, means love truly conquers all deodorant issues. Okay, we are gonna stop here for today, because if we keep going, I'm genuinely worried some of you will start side-eyeing your own family and banning apples from the house. I love fairy tales, I really do, but the original versions, they were not written to tuck you in. They were written to grab you by the throat and say, behave, the world is dangerous. People are weird, good luck. So now I need to know, which one messed you up the most? Was it the kids vanishing in Hamelin, the talking horse head on a gate, the stew situation, or the fact that Donkeyskin is basically Cinderella but make it illegal? Drop it in the comments, because I read them, and I want to see which one lives rent-free in your brain after this. And if you want more of this dark fairy tale chaos, subscribe, seriously, because the next set gets even more unhinged. Like, we are talking more taboo, more cursed objects, more why would anyone tell this to children, and one story that basically feels like a horror movie in a fairy tale clothes. So hit subscribe and turn on notifications so YouTube actually tells you when the next one drops. And if you enjoyed having your childhood gently set on fire, give this video a like, it helps a lot and it tells the algorithm you are also a little bit curious and creepy like me. Alright, go drink water, hug your comfort blanket and maybe don't eat stew for a while. Sweet dreams, or at least interesting ones. I will see you in the next one.